Hey guys, welcome to week 11 of our Proverbs 31 character study. This week we're learning about inner beauty, and our key verses are found in Proverbs 31, 30 through 31. It says, "Charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Honor her for all that her hands have done, and let her works bring her praise to the city gate." The NASB footnotes for this says, "In our society, where physical appearance counts for so much, it may surprise us to realize that her appearance is never mentioned. Her attractiveness comes entirely from her character." It's all about our hearts. And you may be familiar with verse 30 of Proverbs 31, where it says, "Charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised." But that really should be our goal. Like, we know that beauty does not last forever. Outward appearance does not last forever, but what does is our hearts. And we can continue to grow and be matured and have our faith deepen, and that's going to make our hearts so beautiful, and that's what's going to deepen our character and give us that inner beauty. And so that's what we should be striving for in our society, right? Makeup, hair, outfits, all of that is sometimes emphasized, and there's nothing wrong with it, making yourself presentable, by no means whatsoever. But I do think we need to ask ourselves the question: are we spending more time in front of the mirror and in our closets picking out the perfect outfit, or are we spending more time with God? Now, when I mean spending more time with God, I know that we cannot have a 2-hour quiet time every single day. That's just not reasonable. That's not realistic for us, because we have schedules, we have obligations and responsibilities, right? But our time that we spend with God is not limited to our quiet times, because we can spend time with God when we're praising Him and worshiping Him through song, or when we're just praying to Him throughout the day, because we have a direct line to God. We can call on God anytime because of what Jesus did for us on the cross for our sins. So really, we have an opportunity to spend all throughout the day, right? We have moments where we can pray to God, we can open up our Bibles, we can sing to Him. And so really, our priority, what is our priority? That's really what we're asking ourselves, because what we do with our time is going to reflect our hearts and where our priorities are. So it's so important that we are focusing on spending that time with God more so than we are about our outer beauty, right? Because that will fade away. So it's a convicting question for all of us, but I think it's something that we all need to ask ourselves, because charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting, and charm and beauty can only take us so far. I try to tell my little brothers this. They're much younger and by no means ready to start dating, but I always say, you're not just looking for the prettiest girl. You have to be attracted to the girl that you're going to marry one day. When you're ready for that season to start looking for a wife, you have to be attracted, of course, but that's not all there is to it. You're not just looking for a pretty face. You're looking for the full package. And so what is the full package, and what does that really look like? Well, that's the Proverbs 31 woman, right? In Proverbs 31:30, it tells us, "Charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised." That is the focus. The woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Someone who fears the Lord. And what does that really mean, to fear God? Well, it's not like we're anxious or we're scared of God. Those are words that we typically associate with the word fear. But in this case, it doesn't mean that at all. It means that we have a reverence for God, we respect God, and we love God with all of our hearts. That's what it means to fear the Lord. And so that's really what we're striving for, as we strive to be a Proverbs 31 woman, to be someone who fears the Lord. And in the Bible, there is a woman who definitely is someone who fears the Lord, and we see just her crazy courage that she expresses, and that's Queen Esther. And let's talk about Queen Esther and really her story for a second, and kind of go through that and just see for ourselves how she really feared the Lord with everything that she had. So Esther was just, a normal girl, but the King Xerxes, had just pretty much let go of his wife. Like, she didn't obey him, so he said, "You're gone, see ya," banished her, like, "Don't ever look at me, don't ever see me again," type of thing. So he gets rid of his wife, and he's looking for a new queen. And so he calls in, he has people pick the most beautiful young virgins in the land. He has them all come in and have a year of beauty treatments. Okay, girls, who doesn't love spa day, right? Much less a whole year of spa day. That's a big deal, right? And that sounds like a lot of fun. But they were getting prepared to go see the king, right? And for him to pick, which one he wanted for his wife. And what we see is that Esther was one of those women that was picked. So we know that she was beautiful. But here's the thing, that wasn't what set her apart, because in a sea of tons of beautiful women, she was the one that stood out. She was the one that received the favor from everyone that saw her, and she was the one that was ultimately picked queen. So what made her different? Well, one thing that we see is that when she went to go see the king, she had an advisor. They all had advisors that would tell them what to do and things like that. But she didn't ask for anything more than what was given her. She didn't try to have that me first attitude of I have to be the best or whatever, and I have to have the best dress or the best makeup, or all those things, in a me society that people do and that people say. She was so humble, and that's what really shows us just her character, right? And that's what set her apart, that God's favor was on her because she was different, right? She chose to be humble in that situation where everyone else is fighting to be queen. And so ultimately, yes, she is picked to be queen. The king said that she attracted him the most, more than any of the other women, that he was most attracted to her. And so she becomes queen, but that's not where the story ends, because her uncle who had raised her, his name is Mordecai, and at the time, this one official was elevated named Haman, and so he asked everyone outside of the king's gate to bow down to him. And Mordecai was outside the king's gate, and so he would not bow down to Haman because he followed God, and he knew that was not something that he should be doing. Where God was his God. He wasn't going to make anyone else an idol or do anything like that. He was committed to God, and so he said, "No, I'm not bowing down to you." But instead of Haman, he was really, really mad. Haman was mad at this. But instead of him just killing Mordecai, he decides and finds out he's a Jew. So he decides to kill all the Jews. And so anyways, he's plotting a plan. Mordecai finds out of this plan, and he brings it to Esther and says, "Look, don't you think that God has picked you for such a time as this, that you have been given favor to become queen, and you have an opportunity to stand up and fight for your people and to protect your people? And so it's time for you to go do that," right? He's urging Esther to go do that. And let's look at Esther's response, because it is just so courageous. Because here's the thing. Women and the queen and the king, they didn't have like a relationship where it was very personal. The only time the queen would go to the king is if he called for her. So the king wasn't calling for her, and ultimately Mordecai, her uncle, is saying, "You need to go in there and tell him and plead for mercy that the Jews won't be killed, that Haman's plan won't carry out. Basically, he won't be able to carry out that plan." And so anyways, Esther goes in, and this is what she says. She does end up going into the king, but before she goes to the king, this is what she says. Esther 4:16, "Go gather together all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my attendants will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish." Esther knew the seriousness of what she was about to do. This was against the law, and she realized, I might die, but if I die, I die, because I'm going to fight for what I believe in. I love God and I love people. That's what she was ultimately saying here. I'm going to fight for my people. I'm going to stand up for God, and I'm going to be courageous and have faith and be bold. But she also ask everyone to fast. And she says, okay, no one eat, no one drink. We're just going to pray that God shows me what I need to do, right? This is what she's doing. Equip me, God. Give me favor. This is what she's saying. And so I think this is so incredible. When you take food out of this situation, you mean business, okay? Because it is serious. What she was about to do was going to be extremely hard, but God gave her favor. And when she went to the king, he extended grace to her and he extended favor to her, and he allowed her to share her heart with him. And ultimately, the plan that Haman had to kill all the Jews backfired on him, and the king ended up killing him, Haman. And so that's what's so encouraging, is that God does fight for us. And sometimes when we are in a position, when we have a platform, it's time for us to stand up and have courage and speak out so that we can, ultimately what Esther was doing was loving God and loving people. And so we may not ever have to stand in front of a king or have a life or death situation, but we do have the opportunity to stand for Christ, and we will have to make risks that might cost us things and that will cost us things, but it's worth it because we're standing for Christ and we're trying to make an impact in God's kingdom. And Esther is such a great example for us to follow. I also want us to read verse 31 again from Proverbs 31. It says, "Honor her for all that her hands have done, and let her works bring her praise of the city gate." Esther wasn't worried about recognition or praise from people. She was just focused on doing what she knew was right. She was focused on loving God and loving people. And so I think that needs to be our motivation as well, that we're not concerned with, this is what this verse is saying, ultimately, that we're not people who are worried about, how are people going to see me after I stand for Christ? Am I going to be praised? Am I going to be recognized? That's not the motivation at all. The motivation is simply to fear the Lord. Esther feared the Lord, right? She feared God more than she feared man. She feared God because she loved him, right? And that's what allowed her to go do something crazy, courageous. And so really, that is the heart of our inner beauty, is the fear of the Lord. But I think that verse 31 also has a special message for husbands and guys who will one day be a husband, also for kids, really for all of us, because if you're a husband or one day you're going to be a husband and you have a Proverbs 31 wife, it's so important that you're encouraging and uplifting and honoring her. Same thing if you have a mom who's a Proverbs 31 woman, it's important that we take notice of that and that we're encouraging and uplifting and just honoring our moms. And also if we have friends who are Proverbs 31 women, that we're encouraging, uplifting, and honoring them as well. And so I think that verse is a great just reminder for us to appreciate those Proverbs 31 women in our lives. But the heart of fearing the Lord is or the heart of being beautiful, I should say, is fearing the Lord. To love God, that's what's really going to make us stand apart and stand for Christ and to impact people for God's kingdom. Esther was able to impact an entire group of people, right? All of the Jews, by saving their lives because she stood for what she knew was right, because she feared God. She loved God with all of her heart. And she was bold, right? But she was also humble, and she was also courageous, and she just shows us what it is like to have that fear of the Lord, to say, you know what, God, I don't totally understand this. This isn't necessarily fun. She was scared, right? That was scary for her to have to go do that. But she trusted God. And that's where we want to be. We want to be so in love with God that it doesn't matter what happens. We just want to be obedient. And so let's memorize this week Proverbs 31:30. Charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Let's also not forget to have our daily quiet times, because it's so important that we're spending time in God's Word. Thank you so much for joining me. We have one more week for our Proverbs 31 character study, so join me next week for that video. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope you have an amazing day, and God bless.